Hello and welcome back to the boatyard where my project boat Twiggy has been stored over winter. Today is the day of the week when all of the weather forecasts, every single one, Google, BBC, Met Office, AccuWeather, the lot, they all said today was going to be pretty much dry, the driest day of the week for sure. And for that reason I've come along, finally, to put the transom in the back of the boat. And yet, when I peer up at the skies, I fear all those forecasts may simultaneously be wrong, but I'm going to crack on anyway and see if we can get it done. I have, over winter, applied resin to the two pieces of marine plywood, thus sticking them together. There's also 4 screws holding it together as well, so that is now effectively one 30mm thick piece of marine ply. As you can see, there's also... Oh, it's getting windy. It really is going to rain, isn't it? It had better not. Anyway, let us crack on with optimism in our hearts and get the boat unwrapped. I could take this whole thing off, couldn't I? Is that too optimistic, do we think? Let's use one of those weights to keep it all in place without it slipping down onto me. That would be bad. Okay. I think a test fit to remind myself how it goes and check nothing's changed magically over winter. That's the back side. Yes, that's the front side. So that should just, if I remember rightly, should just slot in. Just thinking of it, it's not quite going straight in like it did. Why is it not going straight in? What a good thing I did this before slathering it in resin. Now come along. The end of the very last video where I was doing anything with this, I popped it in, it went in, and all was good. So why now is it deciding to play silly buggers? Ah, there, yep, nearly there. Well, that's odd, isn't it? Forget the weather, this may be scuppering my plans. We know that fits in there. Brief hiatus, I think, while I sort this out. It's in. It turns out it needed just a little jump to the left, but not a step to the right. I did have my hands on my hips for quite a while staring at it though, and I certainly brought my knees in tight. It is still a little tiny bit springy in the middle. This bit isn't quite pushing against this bit, and I recall I was trying to pad that out with a bit of extra fibreglassing on the last video, so I may start by just adding one more sheet under there to give that a bit more solidity, and then we'll have a go at slotting this in, all being well. Right, we'll give the surface a little bit of an abrasion. Alright, I need to mix up a small amount of resin, not a lot, it's only going to put 2 of these sheets on, so a tiny amount of resin. And I have the one that I used recently to seal around the edges of the new transom, the combined transom. At this point, although I did a lot of muttered commentary as I was going along, it took a very long time. So I've speeded it up and you can still see what I did, but I can now add new commentary. Here I am clearly mixing up the resin with the hardener, which I accidentally did in my measuring jug, which has now ruined the jug for any further use, as the resin residue has since set hard. Undeterred, I splooged it onto the back of the boat and laid 2 layers of chopped strand mat onto it, realising very quickly that I had mixed up far too little resin, so had to rush back to the table to stir up some more. The weird whooshing noises you can hear is my breathing under the mask, which I didn't think the microphone would pick up, but it did. With more resin mixed, I could finally get that first sheet secured and stick another one on top. Then I used the roller to expunge any bubbles and excess resin. This didn't go too well, as the roller was part jammed with old resin, despite me having rinsed it in acetone the last time it was used. While that dries, I am going to lightly abrade the surface that I previously put some resin on. That's the back surface, so I'm going to abrade that so it'll stick to the new resin. I will also lightly abrade the front surface as well, you know, so that the resin sticks. That's the idea. I think I'm just going to have to be bold. I'm kind of wanting to put it off because I'm anxious. You only really get one shot at this, because if I mess it up, it's probably going to be, you know, game over, some sort of disaster. The plan is put some resin onto the back of this to make it sticky where I haven't already made it sticky. So that's sticky, just roller that on. Have some thickened resin, making it a nice sort of putty-like stuff, using the colloidal silica to thicken it up, and smear that onto the back of this. And then lift it into place. And I've got it, it's very solid at the bottom. It's kind of held in place at the bottom anyway. And I've got clamps. And I'm also going to use my boat ladder in an ingenious method to push the thing in. See, people suggested all sorts of things about ratchet straps and things as to how to push this. And they're saying drill from the inside. I don't want to be drilling from the inside to put clamps in. I'm just going to push it on and clamp it, and that's going to have to hope for the best, quite frankly. It is fairly solidly in place once it's in place, so I hope that'll do. And yet really I've just got to do it, I think. So it's going to need a lot of resin. I may end up opening the big pot of resin, but for the moment we'll just use the two I've got here. I decided to dispense this into 3 cartons, one of pure resin, which would be used to moisten the back of the transom area, and the other 2 to mix up the thickened resin to smear all over the wood, doing it as 2 cartons because one wouldn't be enough. So to start with, I added catalyst to the pure resin cup and mixed that thoroughly, then rollered it all over the back of the boat. I've no idea who the bloke watching me is. At this point, I now had to work fast because the resin I just rollered was starting to set, and I needed to mix up 2 batches of the thickened stuff and apply it to the wood. Adding the colloidal silica to thicken it is just guesswork until it becomes suitably gooey, and the wretched stuff sometimes comes out in lumps. I did try sieving it, but it took forever, all the while with the first coat of resin drying out behind me. Anyway, I rollered it on like a madman and popped the transom into place, which, remarkably, went straight in this time with no argument. Clamps were applied at the top, along with some ladders at 45 degrees with weights added, which would press the wood into the back of the boat. It didn't need to be pressed hard, it just needed to make good contact. And after a bit of faffing around and some help, I had it sorted. The clamps are actually doing their job holding that against the back of the boat. I just added the ladder and weights because I thought, why not? Bit of extra pressure from that. And then this one over here, now that's a bit of an emergency solution because that top right corner isn't quite pressing against the back. So we're just holding it with a ladder and a weight while a colleague from the boatyard goes to get me a drill and screw, and then I will screw it in from the other side because it is above the waterline there. Once this has all set, and I am going to give it a jolly good hour at least. I mean, it's a nice warm day, it should be going off you know, in the normal sort of time, so I'll give it at least an hour, take all the ladders and weights away, and then I am going to mix up some more of the thickened resin and go round the edges, because there's a little gap round them, and just squirt it in round the edges, which again will hold the transom in place like glue. And before the day is out, I'm probably not going to get all the fiberglass across the back of the thing, but I would like to get at least one sheet of fiberglass laid on top of the back so that in a sense the back is sealed up. albeit with perhaps just 1 or 2 sheets. We'll see how we go with the weather. The clouds have all disappeared now. It's looking a bit more sunny. I may be tempting fate with that. But now I think quick lunch break while that all sets. It is now an hour and a quarter later. I've had a bit of lunch. And what I want to do now is mix up some more of the thickened resin and just squirt it in around all the gaps around the edges, and especially down there. There's a bit of a void down there that I want to put loads of gunge into. Again, same there, and all round the edges. Just make it so it's thoroughly sealed. So more resin. Right, here we go, same again. I'm going to mix up resin with the colloidal silica. Some people have said, why don't I use the little glass fibres? And it's because I'm going to be squeezing it out of a tube, and it'll be too thick, if you like, with the strands of glass fibre. And this is literally just to act as a kind of sealant round the edges. So the thickened resin with the colloidal silica makes a kind of putty. At least that is what I have learned from watching YouTube videos. So we're going with that. It'll be fine, I'm sure. Look at this colossal tin, 5 kilograms of resin. I'm not entirely sure how I get into it. Screwdriver acquired. Look at that gunge. Right, decanting this is going to be messy, I fear. I probably want 500 ml because I think that's 500. So let's. Oh yes, look at that. Oh my god, this is going to go everywhere, isn't it? Absolutely everywhere. Right. Oh, and the wind is not helping. Ah! What a good thing I'm wearing old clothes. That's not quite 500, but I am going to add in the colloidal silica, so let's call that 500. It's 400 of that.
It was at this point, having had resin blown all over me by the wind, that I remembered I should be wearing gloves.
400 at 2% is 8 ml of hardener. I'd like a bit of working time, so I'll give it 6 again. That's a 1.5%. I love this dispenser. You just squeeze it and it goes up to the magic mark.
It does make a difference when you have all the right tools. All those mixing cups and so on laid out really helps.
That into that into that, mixy mix, stick it into that, squidgy squidgy. Right.
And with that scientific explanation sorted, I began mixing up the resin with the thickening agent, trying to keep it thin enough to squish through a dispensing tube, but solid enough to fill in the gaps around the wood. As it turned out, this first batch was definitely on the far too runny side, as I would soon discover. With the gunge tipped into the tube, I could set about squirting it around the transom edges. It did not take long to realise I should have made it a lot thicker. With the rear of the transom hanging not straight down but at an angle to vertical, as soon as I squeezed resin into the edge, it just dripped straight out, which you can see me finding out here and frantically wiping it back into place with my finger. This, unsurprisingly, also resulted in the thin latex of my gloves ripping, so I ended up with resin all over my hands.
Right, lesson to self. This needs to be thicker. It's too thin. Lesson number 2 to self. Take wood off before you accidentally glue the wood to the transom. There we go.
I don't know why I kept trying to squirt the stuff in. It all just kept dribbling out like the boat was incontinent.
That honestly wasn't quite as good as I'd hoped, and a lot of it got over me despite the gloves. I should have made it thicker. It was very runny, and I hope
hope it's going to be all right. But then we live and learn, and that was the whole point of this project, wasn't it? To learn.
Between you and me, I ended up wiping some of it out with a wooden spatula, remixing the resin and having another go. This worked better.
I was hoping, as I mentioned earlier, to get the first sheet of fibreglass over the back, but in fact I don't think that's going to happen today now. All that gunge I've just put in really does need a little bit of time to properly set hard, I think. I've also noticed the old gas supply pipe from when there was a gas bottle on the back of the boat. I've forgotten to take that off, and that needs to go before I can then coat the whole back in fibreglass, and that's going to involve... It looks fairly well jammed on. It's only a pipe, but it's going to involve spanners and possibly a multi-tool to cut it off, and a lot of swearing and things, so that's not going to happen today. So I think what I will do instead is just coat the wood in a light resin coat that can soak in and prime the wood, so to speak, for when I do come back next time, and then put the first sheet of fibreglass on it. But for the moment, it's in, it's gluing, it's setting, so I'll just slap a bit of resin on to semi-waterproof the wood, you know, just stop it being naked wood. And next time I come back, that's when the first bit of fibre, well in fact hopefully next time I'll put all the sheets of fibreglass on. That'd be good, wouldn't it? That'd be a good day's project. Right, let's do some resining.
Remember, we don't have mistakes here. We have happy little accidents.
And that, I think, is me done for the day, so thank you very much for watching. Hopefully next time I'm here I will be fibreglassing loads of layers of glass all over the back, and then it'll be nearly done. Cheers!